By 1925, a teenage girl in New Jersey could earn more than most grown men in her neighborhood doing one simple thing: painting numbers on a watch dial with a wet paintbrush. Within 5 years, doctors were pulling her jawbone out in pieces because that paint was made of radium. That's not even the worst job on this list. Here's what most people believe about factory work in the 1920s. Hard but honest, a fair trade of sweat for a paycheck. But in dozens of American industries this decade, workers were dying, going blind, or being poisoned from the inside out, and their employers already knew it. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which respectable jobs turned out to be the deadliest. Everything here comes from Bureau of Labor Statistics records, the Pittsburgh survey, and documented court cases, no embellishment needed. Number 25. Radium dial painters. Watch companies hired young women to hand paint glowing numbers using radium paint, teaching them to sharpen their brushes by lip, dip, paint, putting the tip between their lips up to 200 times a day. By the mid-1920s, one dial painter's jawbone had gone so brittle, a doctor lifted it out by hand. She died at 24. Therefore, when survivors sued in 1927, the company's defense was not that the paint was safe, it was that the women probably had a different disease entirely. But nowhere was that cold math colder than in Pennsylvania's coal breakers, where the workers were not even teenagers yet. Number 24. Breaker boys. Boys as young as 8 sat for 10-hour shifts picking slate from coal with bare hands, kept gloveless on purpose so they could feel the difference between rock and coal. Fingers split and bled constantly. Boys who leaned too far into the chute were sometimes crushed by the coal itself. Companies forged the boys' ages to dodge child labor laws, and families forged them right back, because a breaker boy's 50 cents a day covered a fifth of a household's costs. Therefore, this wasn't kids being tricked. Whole mining towns depended on it. But the machine that finally replaced them didn't do it out of mercy. Number 23. Cotton mill doffers. Children, as young as 6 or 7, darted between spinning frames on overnight shifts, swapping bobbins before a machine could jam. Overseers reportedly threw cold water on exhausted children's faces to keep them awake near unguarded machinery. But the danger wasn't hidden. Mills openly advertised child labor as charity for poor families. Therefore, it took photographer Lewis Hine sneaking a camera into these mills to make the public actually see it. Number 22. Steel mill puddlers. Men worked 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, stirring molten iron by hand, inches from furnaces hot enough to blind on contact. In 1 year, Pittsburgh steel mills killed 195 workers, and a landmark survey found roughly 1 in 4 immigrant steelworkers was killed or injured annually. Therefore, U.S. Steel eventually built safety programs, not out of compassion, but to stop the bad press. But that reform came only after a decade of bodies. Number 21. Meatpacking killing floor workers. Chicago's union stockyards ran on a disassembly line, each worker performing one violent task on carcass after carcass in rooms slick with blood. Cut fingers were routine. Workers curing meat by hand developed a painful skin condition they nicknamed pickled hands. But the danger wasn't only blades. Worker John Pancizic was pulled into a meat machine's belt and killed instantly, leaving 4 children with no compensation. Therefore, when Upton Sinclair exposed these conditions in 1906, public outrage focused almost entirely on the food, not the workers bleeding to produce it. Number 20. Garment sweatshop workers. Immigrant women and teenage girls sewed 60-hour weeks in crowded lofts where owners routinely locked exit doors to stop theft. In 1911, that setup turned a routine fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory into a disaster that killed 146 people, many jumping from 9th-floor windows. But it took over a decade after that fire for locked exits to actually disappear from garment factories nationwide. Therefore, the fire codes we take for granted today exist because of a catastrophe, not foresight. Number 19. Textile mill lint heads. Weavers who spent decades on the floor breathed raw cotton fiber constantly, developing a chronic lung disease workers called brown lung. while mill towns mocked them with the same nickname. By the mid-1920s, wage cuts in New Bedford, Massachusetts pushed pay under $20 a week. But it wasn't softness that pushed 30,000 workers to strike in 1928. It was watching co-workers unable to catch their breath by 40. Therefore, it became one of the largest strikes of the decade that most Americans have never heard of. Number 18. Glass factory mold boys. Teenage boys sprinted molten glass gobs from furnace to blower on night shifts in rooms exceeding 100 degrees at a pace set entirely by the blower they served. But unlike coal or cotton, glasswork offered real advancement. A mold boy who survived could train up into a skilled blower with real bargaining power. Therefore, glassworkers built some of the strongest early unions in America, even as the boys at the bottom worked the most brutal night shifts of any trade here. Number 17. Ice harvesters. Crews cut massive ice blocks straight out of frozen lakes with hand saws, hauling them into storage houses before mechanical refrigeration existed. Work was done on ice that could crack without warning, in temperatures well below freezing. But this entire trade was already dying by the 1920s as electric refrigeration spread town by town. Therefore, thousands of workers watched their whole industry vanish within a single decade, replaced by a machine that never had to be warned about open water. Number 16. Match factory workers. White phosphorus in match heads caused phossy jaw, bone rot so severe the jaw sometimes had to be surgically removed. The condition was so disfiguring it sparked real public outrage. But industry lobbying delayed a federal ban for years after safer alternatives existed because the safer version cost more per box. Therefore, an entire generation of match workers lost their jaws to a hazard the industry had known about and downplayed. Number 15. Tannery Workers. Turning hides into leather meant standing bare-handed over vats of caustic lime for hours, developing chronic sores and chemical burns as routine. The smell was so infamous, tanneries were pushed to the edge of town, but the workers themselves had no such option to move away from it. Therefore, tannery work became a trade staffed almost entirely by whichever immigrant group had the least bargaining power in a given city. Number 14. Cannery Workers. Immigrant women and, on the West Coast, Chinese and Japanese American laborers stood for entire shifts cutting and packing fish or produce by hand at a pace set by however fast the catch was coming in. Shifts could stretch past 12 hours during peak season, but cannery work vanished for months between seasons. Therefore, whole communities organized their year around chasing whichever cannery was hiring next, with no guarantee it would happen again. Number 13. Railroad Brakemen. Before automatic couplers were required, brakemen climbed between moving freight cars to manually drop a coupling pin, a job that cost thousands of workers' fingers, hands, or their lives so routinely that missing digits became a grim industry joke. But railroad work paid noticeably better than factory work, so it kept attracting men anyway. Therefore, America's railroads were built on a body count. Companies rarely bothered to fully count. Number 12. Coal miners. Men worked narrow seams by lamplight in air thick enough that lamps looked like they were burning underwater, carrying caged canaries whose faster metabolism gave a few extra seconds warning before invisible gas became lethal. In 1907, an explosion at West Virginia's Monongah mine killed over 360 men and boys. And because mine owners were not required to keep an accurate head count, the true toll may never be known. But disasters that size kept happening for 2 more decades, because settlements were cheaper than ventilation. Therefore, American miners in the 1920s were doing a job where the company literally couldn't tell you how many co-workers were alive underground with you. Number 11. Commercial laundry workers. Women stood entire shifts feeding steam mangles hot enough to cause severe burns in an instant of misjudged timing. But laundry work was often dismissed as clean or light labor simply because it didn't involve coal dust or blood, drawing far less reform attention. Therefore, some of the worst burn injuries of the era happened in a job nobody thought to call dangerous. Number 10. Lumberjacks and sawmill workers. Loggers felled trees by hand in remote camps far from any doctor, where a kickback saw or rolling log could kill with no help for hours. But logging camps sat almost entirely outside the reach of state labor inspectors. Therefore, the timber industry's real accident rate from this era is one of the hardest to document, not because it wasn't happening, but because no inspector was ever there to see it. Number 9. Longshoremen. Dock workers hoisted cargo by rope, sling and hook, where a snapped line could crush a man instantly. Hiring happened through a daily shape-up, where foremen simply picked who worked that morning from the crowd. But because the work was casual, an injury that cost a few weeks could be as financially devastating as the injury itself. Therefore, dock work threatened not just the body, but the whole household's income. Every single morning, a man wasn't picked. Number 8. Silk mill weavers. In Paterson, New Jersey, weavers ran looms loud enough to cause permanent hearing damage over a career, while owners pushed workers to run more looms at once for more output. But Paterson's weavers were also some of the most organized workers in the country, striking specifically over being forced onto 4 looms at a time. Therefore, the silk mills became one of the clearest places American workers fought back against speed-ups, not just danger. Number 7. Brickyard Workers. Workers hauled clay and stacked heavy, freshly molded bricks near kilns, radiating heat for hours in open yards with no shade. But brickyards often employed the most marginalized workers in a region, including black laborers, shut out of higher-paying factory jobs entirely. Therefore, a brick building from this era represents thousands of hours of labor from people the rest of the economy had already decided not to protect. Number 6. Rubber factory workers. In Akron, Ohio, workers called crackers fed raw rubber into rolling mills thick with chemical fumes, where a caught sleeve could mean a lost hand. But Akron's rubber boom multiplied the city's population within a decade, pulling in workers faster than safety standards could keep up. Therefore, the same growth that made Akron rich also meant its factories ran on some of the least experienced labor in American industry. Number 5. Felt hat makers. Manufacturers treated fur with mercury to felt it faster, and workers who breathed the vapor for years developed tremors and personality changes, the real origin of "mad as a hatter," decades before Lewis Carroll used the phrase. But even after the medical link was understood, mercury stayed standard because retooling factories cost money. Therefore, workers in one of the era's most respectable-sounding trades were quietly absorbing a heavy metal for a paycheck. Number 4. Cigar Rollers. Workers, including many children, hand-rolled tobacco for hours in dust-thick rooms, paid by the piece, so every bathroom break cost money directly. But cigar workers pooled their own wages to pay a lector who read newspapers and political essays aloud to the whole floor during the shift. Therefore, cigar factories became some of the more politically radicalized workplaces in the country. Number 3. Shoe factory workers. In Lynn, Massachusetts, stitching machines and cutting dies could take a finger in an instant at a pace set entirely by piece rate quotas. But by the 1920s, mechanization had sped the line up even further. Therefore, Lynn's shoemakers weren't just fighting their employers anymore, they were fighting a machine that never got tired and never lost a finger. Number 2. Powder mill workers. Explosives workers handled volatile compounds in buildings deliberately spaced apart so one blast would not set off the next. A spark from friction or static could kill everyone in a building instantly, with no warning. But the industry had already proven exactly how catastrophic one mistake could be, through explosions that leveled buildings and became local legend for decades. Therefore, showing up to a powder mill in the 1920s meant knowing the entire safety plan was, do not be wrong, not even once. Number 1. The company town worker. This isn't one job, it's the cage around almost every job on this list. Coal and mill companies often owned workers' housing and the general store too, paying wages partly in scrip spendable only at company prices. A man could work a full, brutal week and end up in debt to his own employer. But this wasn't an accident. A worker in debt couldn't afford to quit or strike. Therefore, every job on this list wasn't just physically brutal. It was economically inescapable by design, and that's the fact that should stay with you. So next time you pass an old brick mill turned into loft apartments, remember what that Radium girl believed on day one, that she had landed a good, respectable job. The most dangerous jobs of the 1920s were rarely the ones that looked dangerous from the outside. They were the ones everyone had already agreed to stop asking questions about. America did not survive the Industrial Revolution because the work was safe. It survived because the workers kept showing up anyway.